The Cutebee DIY Rose Garden Tea House. I started around February of 2024, finished it this past January. Throughout the year, I was working on other projects too, including getting a new hip. Here's all the many, many parts and pieces. It would drive me nuts fishing through all these bags to find pieces for each item to be made while I'm making it. So I take the time to carefully sort and label items for each piece of furniture or section. To me, it's as much fun as assembling everything. The parts are in labeled bags. There's a sheet with full-size line drawings of all the wood parts and a booklet that shows what pieces you need and gives general illustrated step-by-step instructions on how to assemble them. You also get printed papers with the various items. In this case, the floor and outdoor area for the base. Also wallpaper, flooring, counters, pictures, tea labels, tea boxes, signs, packets, and labels, and many more things. And then there's patterns. These are used to cut out the multitude of materials provided for various purposes. And here I have the patterns attached to the materials in preparation for them to be cut out. Throughout this, I'll show you the tininess of the items, and here's some. Some of these are for plates, for foil that tiny baked goods are placed on, and a furniture cushion. You see a couple little gold squares that have labeled 4x4. Everything is so tiny that we work in millimeters and centimeters, and the items are created overseas, so I'm sure that has a part to do with what measurement unit is used. After I get them all cut out, I label them with the label that is on each pattern so that I know what's what. A bunch of wood pieces are in laser cut sheets, and you have to get them out. It's a little tricky because you can break the thinner pieces. You have to be super gentle. It's much easier with two hands, but obviously my other hand is occupied with this recording. Each wood piece has tiny bridges between the piece and the frame. You have to cut them with a knife. There's usually a few cuts needed on each piece, and here they are punched out. Here's the windows and walls with their acetate sheets all cut out, ready to be glued in place. Patterns are still on them. And more tiny pieces. You can see the tiny spoons and forks in the little tape packets. Everything is so tiny, sometimes I have to use tape to keep them from getting lost. Each packet represents a large piece, like a table, counter, or cabinet. Within that packet are smaller packets and envelopes of the items I need to put in or on the furniture. The packet is labeled with the item name and the package number corresponding to the instruction booklet. Before I knew there was something called kit bashing, where you modify, personalize, or in many ways improve on the kit, I did little modifications and changes. In this case, I did not like the paper printed details. They didn't give a realistic enough impression. I liked my minis to look like I could shrink down and actually be in them, and a paper patio, walkway, and tile floor didn't cut it. I used some of my raw clay with a bit of kosher salt mixed with watered down tacky glue for the patio bricks. I used cornstarch and watered down tacky glue for the pathway stones and added gray paint for the mortar. I cut a sheet of black and a sheet of white vinyl squares with my Cricut. It was very time consuming to place each tiny piece, but it was well worth it. I also streaked the tile floor with some very watered down brown paint to give that streaky tile look, and I clear coated it with Mod Podge so it looks like a shiny waxed floor. Doesn't it look so much better than a sheet of paper glued down? Again, for scale, I present my hand. You can see how tiny everything is. Excuse the dried glue in the palm of my hand. That's where I wipe excess glue when I'm assembling pieces. I can't always put the piece down because I have to hold it for the glue to set up, so my palm proves to be pretty handy. Inside there was a small parquet floor piece that again was just covered with printed paper. So I covered it over with matchsticks in a parquet pattern. It was stained with watered down acrylic paint and coated with Mod Podge. This was tedious and not really as enjoyable as assembling other pieces, but the results turned out great. So again, it was very worth the time and the not funness. And here we are again to show the tiny parts that need to be handled. These I do with tweezers and a magnifier that I wear on my head. These are little tea canisters. You fold the printed box, put a little ring on top, and a label on the ring. Now here's a bird's eye view of everything in place before I put on the roof. The front wall not in place yet, and stringing lights has begun. Here at the side window, there's a little deck that the chair sits on. I covered it with popsicle sticks, stained it with watered down brown acrylic, and clear coated with Mod Podge. The roof gable was tricky because you have to glue two corners together, and that was hard to keep the pieces tight and lined up. So I placed a scrap piece of wood in the space and filled the underside with a lot of very thick glue to get it to hold together. Now with this view, you can see there's gaps and poor lining up of the roof pieces. This frustrated me to no end. I did learn that if I ever do something with a full roof again, to bypass the instruction book, which doesn't have you touch the roof until the end, and tape the whole building together first in order to see exactly where the foundation walls should be to avoid problems with the roof. As it was, when I placed the roof pieces, there was a huge gap between the front three pieces that come together toward the main gable. I had to cut the bottom wall off the foundation and adjust it, and then just use a lot of force after all the glue had dried to press the pieces together, and then fill in gaps with moss and flowers. All in all, it was a fun build and looks like such a cozy place to rest, drink tea, and read.